Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Claire, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. I'm really excited to dive deep into everything that you do, all the teaching, all the meditation, all the books that you write, all the blogs you do, and you also practice law. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking a little bit offline about, you were looking at a past episode and you're like, oh yeah, everything you talked about, there's a blog post that I might have covered about this or something like that. First, if I could, I'm just going to very briefly just give the highlights of your bio just to save you a little bit of time. And then we'll dive deep into it. Of course, if you think there's anything big that I'm missing, you can just jump in at the end. So you started your career working as an associate focused on civil rights and special education from 2008 to 2015. Around 2013 was your first pregnancy. And I think if I understand, it was a tough pregnancy, and it became actually the catalyst to where you are today because you ended up using what you started doing 1-minute meditation practice, but to help with postpartum depression, to help with all the struggles through that. You actually started speaking in 2018 and writing on mindfulness and wellness and other topics like that. In 2020, you founded the Brilliant Legal Mind blog, and you actually became certified in meditation for teaching it. And in 2020, you co-authored a book with 19 other women lawyers. In 2022, you wrote How to Be a Badass Lawyer. In 2024, you just wrote Mommy Needs a Minute, which is a children's book, which I love. And most recently, and you're practicing right now of Counsel at Bricker Graydon. And most recently, you got accepted to be to the training program on mindfulness and meditation, which I would love to learn more about. You just wrote a post, yes, recently on LinkedIn that you are trying to organize your schedule for Q4 because you have more speaking gigs than you can handle or speaking opportunities. So does that kind of give a sense of your career journey?
I'm still a practicing lawyer. I practice at a firm called Bricker Graydon. And in the midst of that, in some of that history, I also changed career focus and firms through there. So I made equity partner at my first law firm. It was a great place to start my practice. I was there for 13 years. And then I changed in 2022. Actually, when I was changing law firms was when I ended up writing my book, How to Be a Badass Lawyer. I was already in a coaching program to get that done because I was really adept at short form writing, but didn't know how to get it to a book. So I used that gap to write and really absorb my attention while I was going through a hard time, actually. And so then I changed firms again in 2024 because that first firm I went to was not a good fit. But where I am now, Bricker Graydon, it's a bigger law firm than I ever expected to be at, 200 attorneys in Ohio and Kentucky. I do school law, which is a fairly emotional, intense area of the law, especially right now. But I've got a great team. It's a great fit. They really are supportive of the wellness and mindfulness stuff I'm doing. And the mindfulness journey honestly came out of my life. The writing came out of my mindfulness practice, and it's been an amazing journey. It's been great to have good things to offer at a time like this in our history, but it's also something where my mindfulness teaching, practice, and writing has really influenced and informed my law practice and helped me in a lot of ways. So I'm happy to talk about all of that. But yeah, I'm also a mom of 2 girls now. My young daughter with the difficult pregnancy, she's now 13. She's doing great. I have a 9-year-old as well. And I will tell you that mindfulness practice really helps with having a 13-year-old child as well. That's intense.
I can relate to so much what you're saying. I have 3 kids as well. 2 are seniors in high school and 1 is a 7th grader. And I really can relate to how writing and sharing influences your actually day-to-day. And that might be an area that we dive deep into. I actually moved to Barcelona for a couple of years and journaled every day about it. And I'm publishing a book from those journals. And it was writing those journals that actually influenced our experience there. And so I'm curious how that, like you just mentioned that with how it influences your practice. Just a quick question. When you said school law and it's a really tough time right now, can you just dive it? Just what do you mean by that? I would love to better just understand that, and maybe even tying into how what you're doing and speaking, how that ties into your day-to-day practice in school law.
Yeah, I think that so a lot of what I do is special education right now. I represent schools and officials in Kentucky and Ohio. I started out doing insurance defense, civil rights defense for other public entities my first year of practice. And then my second year, they said, hey, can you learn special education? Because we've got a lot of it and we don't have anyone who's an expert in it. And I didn't know anything about it, but I just started learning it. So you'll love this because I literally just started reading regulations, finding any podcast, blog, or anything I could. I started showing up to training sessions for educators because there weren't special education legal seminars in my area. And I just started doing the work and learning it and becoming an expert. Through that process, I actually did learn to speak and write on those topics a lot. And that really helped build my reputation. I'm an introvert too. I love public speaking and I love teaching, but I do not like going to networking events with 500 people and having to make small talk. I hate that. And so what I learned was that when I wrote and speak on these topics, clients would start to see them and it helped me build confidence and know how to present myself. And then that ultimately led to more speaking too. So I've liked speaking and writing all along the way. But then when I started meditating, I think one thing that I realized is that I wanted to write about things that didn't just involve law practice or legal issues. And I had a lot of creativity in me that I really needed to tap into or it was going to drive me crazy. And so one of the things I learned was that writing helped me do that. Now that I have this track record and I have these skills and I've done some training and learned about it, in terms of my law practice and how it influences that, I do special education a lot, and those are high conflict cases. They're very emotional, as you can imagine. I deal with parents who are upset at the school district about what we've done, and we try to find a common ground and a middle ground. But it's hard on my clients too, because my clients don't do the things they do because they don't want to help kids. They have to think about all the kids and they have to think about whether what is being requested is appropriate. And so they really take some of this stuff personally, and it's hard for them. But in a broader context, all of us know, regardless of your political stripe, we all are seeing and feeling the effects of division. And the idea that right now, I think a lot of people think good advocacy is yelling at someone and sticking and digging in your heels, and it's just not. And so a lot of times I find that having a calmer approach, whether I'm meditating in the office is one thing, but having a calmer approach and trying to see all the people that I deal with as human beings as opposed to my enemies, it helps me guide my clients. Because ultimately, with my cases, we have to have relationships with people once we settle a case or once we go through a dispute. And so I always have to keep that in mind because it's really fundamentally important to my clients. They're serving students, and so we can never forget that.
And just to be clear, do you represent the parents or the schools?
I represent schools and school officials.
Got it. And is it usually the parents who maybe they want an aide or a para and they're not getting it or something to that
It's
degree?
all kinds of disputes. Sometimes actually they don't want services that the district thinks is appropriate. Sometimes it's not always a denial or not doing. Sometimes it's that parents don't want a behavior plan or they don't want a placement that actually offers more intense supports. And there's reasons for that. And really the purpose of this podcast, I have my family, I have disability in my family. My sister experienced some issues with her education when she was a kid. I think most people have. And most of the people that are my clients, the educators, they get into special education because they've had that experience too. That's in their family too. And they want to help students. So it's not so much in my experience that they don't want to provide, but it is that the law creates a situation where when there is a dispute about a student's educational plan, there are rights and things that are available for them to dispute it. And so I will handle a lot. I will litigate them. I've litigated a lot of them. That's part of my history. But the biggest thing I try to do is work through disputes. And I'm always, the relationship between the parents and the district, it's always really important because it's not like a car accident case where you settle it and then the parties go on their way. It's a case where it's a car accident and then the parties have to continue to work together going forward. And so we have to be a lot more human and thoughtful about the way we navigate that, even when we have to fight and we have to litigate. And so it's really important.
I really appreciate you diving into it and explaining it the way you did, because I can just see how well you represent the client and how much you care about both sides. And yeah, we have to live with each other at post that, especially in a school district. So thank you for that. One of the things that you said that stood out to me is that you're an introvert. And it's more common than people think that those people who speak a lot are actually introverts. I'm curious, do you know what your Myers-Briggs four-letter
Yes.
is?
And I've taken some others too. I
Yeah.
love those things.
Or
So I
Enneagram.
actually, yeah, on the introversion piece. So I am ENTJ and INTJ. So I have tested ambivert on that, but the NTJ was very strong. And I have theories about why mindfulness helped me so much, because I think I do have a strong capacity to connect with other people, but there are energetic consequences of me doing that. And where I am really good is small group or one-to-one. But when I public speak, I only will want to do it on topics that are really within my wheelhouse. I don't want to show up and talk about something I
Yeah.
don't know really well. And I love teaching. I've had that since I was a kid. Actually, I went to a summer camp when I was a kid, and it was a public speaking summer camp. And I remember we had to do an instructional talk, and I did origami when I was a kid, and I did a talk on how to make an origami box, and I gave the instructions, and I like won best instructional award for that camp. And I remember that has been a skill for me since I was young. So when I'm teaching something and when I'm sharing something I'm passionate about, it's not, I don't feel like I'm fake. It's so easy. It just comes out of me. When I have to go network at an event and find something to talk to people about, I struggle. But I'll tell you, like, having written and using LinkedIn and other blogging and all this stuff, it has helped so much, because a lot of times I don't have to think of something to say. People will come up to me and talk about something I've written or I've shared.
Yeah.
And so it just makes it so much easier.
I swear you're going to make me cry. This is you are me. And there's many people like this sort of trait, but it's great to find somebody like, maybe I'll give this to my wife, because I struggle in talking in small groups. I smuggle, like we always say, small talk, right? I did a TED talk. I'm speaking a lot. Put me in front of an audience of 1,000 people. I'm happy. Like, as long as I'm speaking about what I'm talking about. And I'm wondering, like, there's probably a lot of attorneys listening, right? Or who will listen, or who exist, who like have that, like that is who they want to be, that creative outlet they want to get out, that speaking of, but they don't know where to start. They don't know how to get in front of people more often. They're not sure where to go. And maybe we can use this episode, because it's Lawyers Who Learn, to share a little bit about how your journey of speaking back, I guess, when you first started on special education to I don't know, maybe you can share how many speaking gigs you're doing in Q4 this year, the way we started, and we can take people through that journey and help people learn how you've gone through and constantly build that up, and how, while it makes you exhausted, it fills your bucket every time you speak.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to answer this directly, because you pointed to a lot of different directions in my mind, and I'm like a big picture thinker too, so I want to go to all of them.
My
But I'm
apologies.
going to start with this, because I think it's fundamentally the most important thing. At a certain point, so I've had massive anxiety and overthinking for most of my life. When I started meditating and I don't meditate for 1 minute a day. Now I do about 30. I worked my way up. But when I started meditating, the huge thing for me was that I started to be aware that I was thinking. And then I learned some strategies for stopping and then challenging those thoughts, and then realizing that thoughts were actually just a symptom of fear. And I learned how to take care of the fear. And when I could do that, I could do almost anything. But really, when things started to change for me was when I realized, Claire, you have been afraid your whole life. And you have been afraid of looking stupid and not being perfect at things your whole life. And it's gotten some good results. You did well in law school. You were good. You tend to be good at things that you do, but you feel really stuck. And so at a certain point, I just got sick of always being afraid. And I just decided that I was going to accept being afraid in some situations, and accept being potentially rejected and maybe people laughing at me in some situations, because I was ultimately happier. That's really it. And I don't know, there's not a way to sugarcoat that and make it better, except to say that at the end of the day, it is worth it. It is worth it. I can't make it nicer or better. You're going to be afraid and it's going to feel terrible. But at the end, once you've done it, it actually feels really empowering. You meet some amazing people, you find these skills you didn't know you had, and you realize you can learn stuff and it's okay.
Again, I'm literally gonna, you're 100%. So many people can relate to that. You mentioned meditation was a way for you to stop your thoughts. To me, I look at, and I think you've talked about this as well, but I write a lot, I read a lot, I walk a lot. To me, meditation is also, if I go for a half-hour walk in the park, or if I sit in my terrace and I meditate for a half hour, it's the same sort of feeling, right? Like you separate from the computer, you get out from the day to day. And you mentioned that was one of the things that helped you get, or not get over the fear, but just accept the fear. What, like, was it literally, okay, I know you talked to your friends about this and they said, okay, you need to tell more people about it. And maybe somebody asked you to speak once, but what was the transition from speaking once or twice to, like, did you literally just start sending out proposals to conferences and to firms and to organizations? Because sometimes people think it all just comes to you. You didn't put any, people saw how great you are, and every speaking gig you've ever gotten is because people just reached out to you. Maybe that is the case, but that, I'm curious, like, how you actually executed getting over that fear, or living through that fear.
Yeah, and I told you I listened to Kendra Broden's episode, and she talks about how she was this good salesman, and that was never me, and it never will be me. But what actually happened, so when I started speaking on, so I already had a track record with speaking at work, and I knew how to put a seminar together. I knew how to speak well and confidently and share information. But when it came to mindfulness, I had not really, honestly, when it came to mindfulness, I had not told anyone really that I was meditating. It took me a long time. I finally told my husband and some friends, and then I didn't really talk about it. But in 2018, I had made partner and I was wanting to write some more. I had written some articles for legal magazines about things like leadership and law practice that were a little moving away from pure legal issues. And I liked it. And I was like, I can do some more. So I applied to work for, or to be the writer in residence for Miss JD, which is a group about empowering women lawyers. And I remember I was afraid because I had to write one blog post a month at that point. I was like, can I do that? And it's hilarious now because I've written over 300 or almost 300 at this point on the blog. But that's one of the topics I wrote about, was a mindfulness topic, mindfulness for lawyers. And actually, some of those posts got republished in magazines and elsewhere, and they got more of a recognition than I expected. I also started using social media, especially LinkedIn then, because as a practical matter, no one would see the blogs if I didn't share them. So I just started sharing them, and that kind of drew me into that direction. And then once I shared the mindfulness one, a mentor of mine encouraged me to apply to speak at a women's professional summit in our area. I was active with the chamber, and so I applied to speak there. I had never talked about it before. Nobody knew who I was, and women were bringing chairs in the room like I was some kind of celebrity. And it just was really successful. And it honestly, like, in retrospect, that session was so like wooden and not the way I do it anymore. I've had to learn so much. But then after that, I was also involved with a legal organization, and they needed a CLE. And I was like, I think I can turn this into a CLE. I didn't know how to do that and get ethics credit, get credit for it. So I called our lawyer's assistant program director and said, how do you get ethics credit for, or credit for something like this? And she said, do ethics. So I turned it into a CLE, and then it just went from there. And I didn't really think about it as a paid speaking thing at the beginning at all, because I didn't know whether I could do that or how to do that. At some point, people started honestly emailing me and say, hey, Claire, what are your rates to come and speak? And I was like, I guess I should figure out some rates. I don't know. And so at first I just used like my hourly rate because I had no idea what to do. And then over time, I've changed that and I've learned a lot about that. And one of my mentors here at the law firm does a lot of speaking too, and she's helped. But I've just had to learn it. And I've also had to think about, how do I want to manage this? Now, I have applied to speak other places. I'll do it when it's appropriate, but that skill is also, that's one of the places where it's really helped my law practice, because we also are in law practice, you want to speak at some conferences sometimes. There's real advantages to doing that. And so having that experience and that idea generation skill strong and creating some new content and respinning something new out of just your practice experience, that ability, that's super compelling, and it can really help you market your law practice, get to know people, and get clients that way.
How many speaking opportunities are you doing in Q4?
I have a chart. Let me pull it up. And some of these are, and yeah, it was mostly like, some of it was like the lack of structure. I had a weird summer because I was traveling. And this is not bad, I'm not complaining, but like I did a bunch of short trips this summer instead of a big vacation. I went with my husband to see Kendrick Lamar in Vegas, and then we went to see
My son is
Beyonce
jealous.
in Atlanta.
Amazing.
My parents fortunately took the kids somewhere fun on their own. But then I also went to the Mindfulness and Law Society conference and retreat out in San Francisco. So it was a real kind of herky-jerky summer. And then I came back and the office was closed for 3 weeks and I had all these things. So I made myself like a chart. I think it's over 10.
Wow.
Just looking at it. Some are virtual, a lot of them are virtual. But once I started doing some sessions for Lawline, then all kinds of other people saw it. Yeah, asked for more.
Great transition. You've taught 2 courses on mindfulness or meditation and well-being for Lawline. I would love to hear about that experience. And you just said people had saw your courses on Lawline. And so tell me, I would love to hear that experience from a faculty member.
Yeah, and this is actually funny. So I did a session on compassion fatigue for a local legal group, and I think there were issues with marketing in it, and I maybe even changed the date on them because of a conflict, which almost never happens. And they were gracious and allowed me to change it. But when I did the session, nobody showed up. So I just recorded it and I was like, hey, we'll put it on my YouTube channel. And if anyone watches it later, that's great. And then I think I did a blog post later about it and shared it. And now that was not a full CLE, but it was on the topic of compassion fatigue. So then I shared it on LinkedIn, and Gabby DeSilvo found me, and she's fantastic. And she just said, do you want to turn this into a CLE? And I was like, sure, actually, I'd love to. So it was really empathic overwhelm, but I use the term compassion fatigue because that's what a lot of people know. And then Gabby said, do you want to do 2? And so I had already done one on confidence, and I said, let's start with the confidence one that I know and I'm familiar with and I know is good. And then we'll do the compassion fatigue one next. And both have been received, and I get notes sometimes from people about enjoying those. And then after that, some of those have been repeated. Compassion fatigue has a lot. And then I've done some others too. One group up in Pennsylvania found me, and I've done a few things for them. And I just, for instance, did an anger management one, and then that's been repeated. And I like Gabby so much, she asked me if I wanted to do something this year. And so we've got one on dealing with difficult opposing counsel or difficult people in like litigation and law practice. That's something I unfortunately have dealt with in law practice, and it really helps to have some strategies and to think about how to support yourself through that, because it helps you stay kind and sane, but also remain a good advocate and counselor.
Yeah. Shout out to Gabby. Wellness and mindfulness is her passion as well as mine. As I could talk about this topic all day because it's how to improve and how to grow. One of the things I love saying, teaching is the best form of learning. How is that? How is teaching about is there more from, I always wonder, again, this is from my perspective, should every attorney, doesn't have to be on Lawline, doesn't have to be a CLE course, but should every attorney or every person try to teach what they know to somebody else? Because what I have learned, when you try to teach something, you have to be able to know it enough to communicate it succinctly enough that someone can understand it. And so you have to simplify that process. And in this day and age where AI can almost do everything from writing great blogs, writing online, the one thing it can't do, at least right now, is take the words out of your mouth and clearly say it to somebody else, either in person or not. And yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on, is that a skill that every attorney should be doing regularly to help them grow more in their practice?
I think it's probably a skill that a lot of attorneys can learn. I don't know that all attorneys necessarily would find a lot of great returns on doing that. I think that I do think that it does take, if you're doing extra CLEs or seminar presentations, that takes a lot of effort. And that is why that I still speak for free a fair amount, especially for a cause I like, or for something like Lawline where I know there's going to be a real good return on it, or I'm at least going to reach a lot of people with an important message. There's reasons to speak for free, but a lot of times I do charge because it is a lot of work. It really is. And so I do think attorneys should assess for themselves whether that is the best way to use their time, because there's so many ways to market and network and connect with people. That's just one of them. So I will also say teaching can mean a lot of things. Teaching can also mean doing a LinkedIn post or a YouTube video. Some lawyers are teaching some of their stuff on TikTok and they're killing it doing that. And so maybe be expansive about it. But in terms of this idea of teaching, I think that it has helped me. Teaching helps me be a better student of the law and also of mindfulness, and it helps me know it better. And so, and there's always this, I do almost always, even if it's a repeat session, I learn something by doing it. So one of the things that I noticed, and I'll tell you like from a writing standpoint, one of the things I started was very early in my kind of teaching speaking career, I started writing about mindfulness on a blog. And I didn't approach it like I'm this huge expert and everyone needs to know. What I more was thinking was when I started meditating, there was almost nothing out there that really spoke to me as a lawyer. There were some books out there and there were some great resources that taught me some of the practices, but very little told me how I could use it. And there was also this idea that like the people I was seeing talking about it were from California or New York. They always had a big firm background. Many of them left law practice and then started being a coach. And it wasn't like speaking to me. And some of them used a lot of like lingo and stuff that wasn't always very accessible. So I wanted to do something a little different where I was talking about here's some very practical basic stuff. Here's some ways it really fits into your life. And I never approached it as I know everything. Here's what I love and here's what's worked for me. But the process of writing over and over again, especially in the process of writing in the book, if I'm going to put something in a blog post or write it or teach about it, I'm going to know it really well. I'm going to think about it from multiple angles. I'm going to be ready for questions that might come up. I'm going to be willing to admit the limits of my knowledge and the limits of what my perspective is. And that helps me know it better. It builds confidence in what I do, and it just makes me more expert. So I think the whole process of teaching, it should be a learning one. And that's why, like you mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time. I have a blog, I've written books, and I'm also in a training course, and that's because I can't stop. I started taking some of those courses. I've learned so much from them. I benefited from them, and I just can't stop doing it. I really love the learning process, and they add things to my life, and so I keep doing them.
Love it. You're saying it so well. And the last thing you said, you can't stop. I can relate to that as well, right? Like I could not stop trying to teach or share or write books if I just couldn't. My body would not let me stop doing it to like, because none of it necessarily has to do with my day-to-day, right? To my running Lawline and putting together CLE programs. It has to do with just wanting to share experiences that I think will bring value to others. And I love the process. Like it's the journey of preparing to teach, the teaching, just the output of the learning process to get there. And it is painful sometimes. Writing a book is painful. Agree or disagree?
My experience was not that bad.
Okay.
But I will say it's not easy, right? There are painful moments.
Painful moments.
My experience wasn't that bad because I had already by that point written a lot. I had some confidence in my voice. I also did join a coaching program to get it done because I knew if I go through this once, I would learn the skill and then I could do it again. But I had an impediment to getting it done. And that was just the transition and how do I structure this? And so I did a coaching program and it really helped. And so since then, I've done some other books. Now, I, for instance, just wrote a novel and I really wanted to get it out this year, but then I lost steam over the summer. I thought I would have more time to work on it and I didn't. And so I've got that. And I also have another idea for another book. And so At this point, I'm having to learn how to pick my battles a little bit,
For
but
sure.
that's okay. I have so much confidence and appreciation for just allowing myself to even write a novel when I don't know how to do it. I actually shared it with some friends and a few people read it and nobody told me to quit. Some people said they liked it for writing fiction, which is not something I do, and allowing myself to go on that adventure. That was really fun, but it can be painful and it can be a gut check. I had diva moments throughout that with my coach. He had, at one point, he sent me back some edits and he said, I think this is really like too long and it's not as focused as it could be. And I heard that as this is bad and you need to start over. And he was
Yeah.
like, no, this needs to be 2 books.
Yeah.
And then I felt better.
Yeah. Are you self-publishing or working with a publisher?
Yeah, I self-published the How to Be a Badass Lawyer. It was really self-published, but the children's book, that happened because I have a friend named Jeremy Richter, who's a great lawyer who has written tons of books, and he has a little company that helps lawyers self-publish.
Nice.
And I also have a friend who makes art the way I generate words. She just draws and does everything. And so she did the pictures for it, and that was just a fun experience.
Love it. Love it. We've talked about a lot of different things going on in your life right now. What project are you most excited for? As I guess maybe it relates to your learning and growth.
I think I'm excited for I'm excited for my law practice. I'm seeing some growth with the law practice. I am starting to see, I've been here about a year and a half. I'm starting to see how I really fit in the practice. So I worked at a big firm as a law clerk and I thought I didn't like big firms. And then what happened is through the magic of the internet, one of the partners here, Laura Anthony, shout out, she found me and she just struck up a friendship with me. And then over the years, she was low key recruiting me, but never pressure. But we just shared information and resources and things like that. And then when I wasn't happy at my last firm, I reached out and ended up here. And it's been a great fit. I'm doing like wellness stuff for the firm, and I get to speak and present and train as part of my job. And so that's growing some from the special ed standpoint. I'm seeing some connectivity between my law practice and my wellness teaching. I've got a seminar I'm doing out at a conference for special educators next month in San Diego. So I'm going out there to talk about self-care for special educators. And I'm getting to do some cooler kind of speaking engagements too, which is more like going to businesses and companies and
Yeah.
working with them. I just am doing one in April and I just ordered some author copies of my book. They're going to give them out to people and we're going to talk about
Love
things
it.
to do a CLE. So that kind of stuff is really cool. But I want to grow the law practice and grow our presence in Kentucky, but also continue to grow in other areas. And I think part of that's going to have to be like me evaluating my time and
Yep.
being a little bit more judicious about it because I tend to want to do everything.
You mentioned earlier on about the anxiety and the fear that you had, and you were just sick of like it holding you back, and you just went through it. And, everybody, part of learning is getting past your comfort zone, and going to the next level until you hit the next comfort zone and you got to do that. Where is the comfort zone you're in right now? And like, where do you feel unsettled or scared? If this comes to mind of what's like what you're trying to break through next, is there something that you're working on and that's you're unsettled every day on where you want to get to?
I feel great in like my firm and where I'm going. Where I'm unsettled is the state of the world. And I don't think anyone is really even that surprised by that. Like where it's going and where it will end and how it will work and how it will affect my clients, how it will affect my family. And I don't know that there's a great answer to that. I'll tell you what I've been doing, and that's walking a lot. I've been taking walks outside a lot. I will say that like I went to a retreat in May and it was a week-long retreat. And the big lesson from that was that I was ignoring how I feel. I was not intentionally, but like subconsciously not really being willing to feel that fear. And so I've been more intentionally just really checking in with how I feel. Claire, how are you doing? Okay, how are you really doing? And really sitting with that, talking to my friends and colleagues a lot, talking to my supporters, and honestly, trying to do the good that I can. It is wonderful right now to have the ability to offer some practical skills, some trainings, some presence that is talking about reducing conflict, increasing kindness, understanding that kindness is a powerful thing. understanding self-compassion, learning some strategies for calming things down, and just being with fear. That stuff, sometimes what's going on in the world, it does create these doubts like, why is it even worth it? Why should I even bother? Everything is a mess. And then I usually just have that little mental temper tantrum for a while. And then I come back to, that's exactly why you're doing it. That's
Yeah.
exactly why. And it motivates me. And I'll tell you, it feels really good to be able to do that right now. And like, for instance, like I guide meditations for the firm. I do them for the Mindfulness and Law Society too, which are free and anyone can stop in twice a month. And like just being with people on hard days, it
Yeah.
feels a lot better. It doesn't make things perfect, but it feels a lot better than not being able to do that.
What I love about your book, Being a Badass Lawyer, is not about, it's about self-care, and it's about making sure you're taking care of yourself and giving the tools to do that. And that's how you're able to do and be a badass lawyer versus like your first impression. That means going out there and doing what I love the twist on what that means. And I think what you just said is the most important thing that we all need. And we've always all needed, but there's always a reason, is self-care. And you can help people with that in what you teach and what you share and what you write, and both in special education and other areas. So I love all that. With ending this, I usually like to go into what books have been impactful for you in your career, whether sometimes people look at their Kindle list or Audible, or they look around their office, but because I'm going to compile a list for others from all these interviews of the top books that have been recommended. So I just didn't know if there's some that come to mind off the top of your head that you would love to share.
Yeah, so I do book reviews on the blog a lot. So I am an Audible person. I'm very auditory and always listening to a book. And I just did a review of Deep Work and I didn't love that one as much, but I usually don't review them unless I really like them. I did the review of Deep Work because I have a discussion coming up and I wanted to get ready for it.
There you go.
But probably one of the most important, it's not a law book or anything, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I think most people should read that. As I've alluded, one of the things that just changed my whole life was tapping into creative pursuits and work at home, everywhere. It's a huge strength for me. It's something that was really missing at the early part of my practice. It is a confidence building exercise in itself, because just making something that didn't exist before, it's like doing magic. And so I think that book is just wonderful, and it really taps into some of the like fear stuff I was talking about. And then there's so many others though on the blog that I really like. That's been one of the most important ones, I think, from like a personal development standpoint. Laura Vanderkam's work on time management. She's a time management expert. She talks about time tracking. She has so many books and podcasts, and I reviewed one of them on the blog. But when I was a young mom and I was like struggling to deal with anything, because you're so tired as a new parent, and I was like a litigation associate trying to deal with that. And her matter of fact, you can do it approach to things, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, it really helped me. And I do think like it guided me, because she talks about writing a lot too. And so that was a really good one. One of the favorite books that I have reviewed is The Confidence Gap by a guy named Russ Harris. That was like a free Audible Plus book. And it's one of the more popular reviews on the blog. It did inform my confidence presentation a lot. And I just think it's got some really good strategies. It doesn't say it's a mindfulness book, but it really is.
Love it. When I see you talk and you go through all this, and it's clear you can just go on forever, because when you write and when you speak and you're constantly in that, to me, it's just like working out at the gym. It's like you're working out your brain and it's sharp. And that's why the key is you do need to be consistent in writing and speaking, because it just keeps everything going. I'm sure when you took summer off, you had to restart that engine to get it back in there, and you're certainly in it. So really appreciate that. Really appreciate you taking the time and your busy schedule to share, not only today, but on Lawline and everything else you do. Any way I could continue to support you, I would love to. And I will make sure to share those courses on Lawline as well when I put on the description for this podcast. So thank you so much again, Claire, and hopefully you can continue these conversations in the future.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.